Hi, this is Kirby Sommers. Today is October 15th, 2025, and this is a patron-only podcast. So I don't know how many of you have experienced paranormal activities, but I have. Um, so some people have seen ghosts. Um, Others have basically psychic premonitions. Other people have what's called telekinesis, which is you can move things with your mind. And there's other stuff that's basically like telepathic communication. And then at some point, um, the sighting of, let's say, UFOs was added into what's considered paranormal, which was basically coined in 1920. So when I was three, according to my mother, I told her that we were going to have a fire. Now, clearly, I'm 3 years old. I have no memory of this, and I'll share other experiences I had where I do have a very vivid memory of. But the first one that I was told about was I was three. I told my mother we were going to be in a fire. And then soon afterwards, we were engulfed in flames. And the fact that I had told her alerted her to the severity of it because she had to essentially, at the time, we lived in a walk up building, and she had to climb down the steps and save the children. You know, it was myself and my siblings, and we have three sets of different siblings which at one point when I was little, all lived together. So she was able to get us all out of the house based on the fact that I had given her a warning that, yeah, we were going to have a fire. And basically, she said that she would have not thought anything of it. She would have thought maybe somebody burnt something while cooking in one of the other apartments, because clearly I lived in a apartment building in New York City. But that, I told her this. And so, okay, the second experience, and the one that I remember, happened when I was 5 years old. As I just mentioned, we are three sets of siblings. My parents were each married to other people before they met each other. And my father was married twice. And so we're all staggered. At the age of five, one of my brothers was 20 or 21. I believe he was just about to turn 21. He was like my big brother. He built, let's say, a swing, uh, basically hanging from one of the doorways in our apartment for myself and my other sister, who was a year younger than me. And he was a quiet guy, intellectual. He went off on vacation to visit family in another place, like far away from New York. And I'm not going to mention where, and I'm not going to mention my brother's name. In any event, I had never, by the way, I didn't know about death when I was five. I hadn't gone to any funerals, nothing of this. I just had no knowledge of any of that stuff. I was only five. So I'm in my bedroom, and I had my own bedroom at the time. I was no longer sharing a room with one of my sisters because as my siblings grew up, they left the nest. And I was awakened by the very strong smell of flowers. Now, I was born into a Catholic family, Catholic and Jewish, but we followed the Catholic tradition. And as a Catholic, when someone dies, there is a funeral at a funeral parlor, and typically there are flowers that are sent to the service. And when I looked look, I opened my eyes because of the smell of the overwhelming smell of flowers. I could see them all around my bed, and at the foot of my bed was a coffin. Again, I had never seen a coffin. I didn't know about dead people. I didn't know anything about funerals or anything like that. So when I saw the coffin, I began to yell for my mother, and I started screaming that my brother had died, that my brother had died, my brother is dead. And she rushed into my room. She told me I was having a nightmare, and I tried to explain to her, no, the smell of the flowers woke me up. I wasn't having a nightmare. I just had to get up because of the flowers. And don't you see the coffin? And don't you see that he's in there and he's dead? And she said, no, 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 it's fine. He's just on vacation. Go back to sleep. Well, by the time I was 5, I was also advanced. I was already in first grade. I didn't have to go to kindergarten. And instead of my mother picking my sister and myself up from school, she was in kindergarten. I was in first grade. It was my mother's friend who would come and help her with us and, you know, stuff that needed to be done around the house. And so when I saw her, the first thing I said, so why are you picking us up? And she says, oh, because your brother is dead and your mother has to leave. She's packing to go. And so, immediately I was reminded of what happened to me the night before. And, my mother never spoke to me about it. My sister and I arrived at the apartment. My mother was frantic. She was packing. And she went and she buried my brother at the location where he died. The second thing that is quite memorable, and we were not told necessarily why my brother had died. In fact, it was a big secret and continues to be a secret with some of my siblings who still don't know what happened. So I was in another, we had a lot of different bedrooms in this apartment that we later lived in because we moved when I was 5. And so this happened in the second apartment that I would live in as a child. And then I remember not being able to sleep. My door was ajar, and the bed, from the position that I slept, I could see behind the door, which again was ajar. It wasn't closed, it was ajar. And I saw a little boy hanging from a noose behind the door. I must have been 10. So again, I screamed for my mother. She ran into my room. Now, I just want to interject and say that I said that my brother built us a swing using rope before he went on vacation and before he died. Well, I saw the same rope around this little boy's neck, and I screamed for my mother. And I instinctively knew, although my brother was 20 and a grown man, at least to me, because I was only 5 when he died, I instinctively knew that the little boy that I saw hanging behind my door was my brother. Now, what happened after really terrified me. What's I wasn't that terrified to see a little boy hanging behind the door, but what happened next did. So my mother comes into the room. She says, it's okay. But by this time, everyone in the house had awakened. My sister, who was in the room across mine, everyone in the house had awakened. My mother comes out of the room completely possessed. My brother's ghost had entered her body. And so, as my mother walked out of the room, we could all tell that she was no longer our mother. Now, that scares me to present day. And she spoke to us, and my sister and I, she's a year younger than I, she and I were hugging each other, screaming, "Mommy, mommy, stop, mommy, mommy, stop." But she didn't stop because she was literally possessed. And so she went on to say some things in the form of my dead brother. And then after a while, she snapped out of it and she just fell to the floor. Okay, that was bad. Now, one that happened. Now I've had, I guess, what you could call ESP forever. I try not to dwell on it. In fact, whenever I feel like I have a premonition about something, I just try to push it away. Whenever it's not something that I really, really, let's say, utilize. So I was on my way out of my New York City apartment as a grown woman. I would say about 10 years ago or so. And as I walked out into the lobby area to leave, I could smell my mother's perfume and I can sense my mother's presence. My mother died in 2000, at the end of, like, just before, like, in the 2000s my mother died. And but I could sense her and I could feel her, but I could also hear her explain to me that she was here to take a relative of mine who was my sister's child, therefore my nephew. But because we have, again, staggered siblings, this nephew was really brought up like my baby brother. So that when he was born when I was almost 6. And so she told me that she was here to get him. And in my mind, I didn't say anything. I wasn't talking. There were no sounds in the lobby. She said to me, I said to her, sorry, "Oh no, you can't take him. I will not let you take him." And so I ran back up because he was living in Florida. I'm living in New York. And I called, and he was at the time staying with his mother, my older sister. And I remember calling her frantically. And I said, "You've got to take him to the hospital. He's dying. He's going to die." She says, "No, he's completely fine. And I don't want to hear your hocus pocus." I guess, you know, as she's 14, 15 years older than me. And she probably got tired of hearing all of my stories, but they all came true. So I don't know why she didn't listen to me. In any event, he had just suffered a stroke and he was laying in bed, and he would have died had I not continued to press and persist that he was going to die. However, he was taken to the hospital. He never fully recovered. Eventually, he did die. However, he did not die for a while, and he was left partially paralyzed and suffered brain issues and retained the mental capability of a child. And the reason that happened was because my sister did not believe me. And so she did not take him to the hospital for 3 days, during which time he had had multiple strokes and was on the verge of death. Now, had she taken him to the hospital as soon as I called her, he would have been fine. But my mother did not take him. And what it reminded me of was, and it always reminded me of this, was an episode of The Twilight Zone where, one of the characters wishes for this person not to be dead, but then the person was left in a very horrific condition because uh, the wish was not specific as to bring him back, but bring him back as he was before, not bring him back as he is now, which is what happened when I was trying to tell my mother, no, you're going to leave him. And she did leave him, but she left him as he was at the moment that I felt he was going to go with her. So I just wanted to share with you these experiences that I have had, and I'm curious to hear if you too have had a paranormal activity. Okay, guys, you have a good day. Bye.